What happens after death? Do we truly disappear, or is that the moment we finally begin to see everything? The summer of 2012, I, James, a 45-year-old former soldier, was living what felt like a quiet, ordinary life in the state of Oregon. But after a sudden stroke, I was rushed to the ICU. My heart had stopped. I don't remember the moment I collapsed, but I remember with striking clarity the moment I left my body. I looked down and saw my body lying there cold, pale. Doctors are trying to revive me with a defibrillator, but I didn't panic. I felt light, free. The pain was gone. I floated upward silently, and the world below began to fade, as if someone were slowly dimming the light of reality. There were no cries, no thunder, just a vast, endless space. And strangely, I wasn't alone. A voice spoke not through my ears, but directly into my soul. James, you've completed your first act. I asked, where am I? And the voice replied, this is the place where every question will be answered if you dare to look. And then, a corridor of light opened before me. There were no walls, no ceiling, just a flowing stream of energy alive, as if it could breathe. And within that light, I began to see things the living were never meant to see. I saw my childhood again. The year was 1977. The first time I skipped school was just to go fishing. I saw my mother's final embrace before cancer took her from me. I saw my wife's eyes filled with both pain and pride on the day I walked away. My mind was already shattered. But the most terrifying part was that I didn't just see these moments, I felt them. I felt the pain others had once carried, because of me. The loneliness my son felt every time I wasn't there. The wound left behind by a careless word I once said to a dear friend from long ago. The tearful eyes of a nameless girl I had hurt, all because of the pride of an unformed man. I relived every harm I had caused. No excuses. No justifications. Only the unfiltered truth. I was almost undone by the weight of it all. But the voice did not let me go. James, would you like to see what comes next? I said nothing, because I wasn't sure if I dared to look. And then the light surrounded me. A wordless forgiveness. A feeling as if the universe itself was holding me close. I don't know how much time had passed. 2 minutes? 20? 2 years? Time no longer existed. All I knew deep in my soul was that something greater was waiting ahead. And then I heard my wife crying. The monitor started beeping again. The ICU lights were blinding. I had returned. But I was no longer the James Walker I had been. I used to think the biggest shock in life it was when your heart stops beating. But the real shock is what you see after that. I don't know how long it took me to realize I had died. There were no alarms. No angels holding a clipboard saying, "Time's up, James." Just silence. A silence so profound, I could hear my thoughts echoing back at me as if the universe itself were listening. I saw my body lying there, motionless on the hospital bed. Something was watching from above. And that something was me. The feeling of slipping out of my body was like peeling off a suit that had been too tight for far too long. Weightless. Transparent. Invisible. No more pain. No more illness. No more gravity. Only one thing remained, consciousness. I remember screaming, "What the hell is going on?" But no one answered. And then I realized I didn't even have a mouth to speak with anymore. I turned my head, or more accurately, my thought turned, and I saw the doctors working frantically to save me. They were shocking me, shouting, but they didn't know I had already left the game. And then, the darkness began to fade. A light appeared in the distance. No, not the surgical lamp, but a soft yet powerful light, as if every ounce of love that had ever existed was wrapped into a single beam of radiance. I was being pulled toward it. I couldn't resist. And truthfully, I didn't want to. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed wasn't the scenery. It was the feeling. The purest feeling I've ever known. Complete. Beyond words. No more fear. No more regret. No more sense of lacking. Every question I had ever wrestled with, who am I? Why am I here? Am I worthy? Was answered in a single glance. No words. No logic. I just knew. I understood. And I remembered. There was a being standing before me. No face. Only light. And somehow, beyond all reason, I knew this was the one who created me. He didn't ask me a single question. There was only a gentle touch, not with hands, but with a frequency of pure energy. And then, before me appeared an endless hallway stretching far beyond what I could see. On each side were doors made of light. And behind every door, it was a memory from my life. I saw my mother when I was just 4 years old, holding me in the rain because I was afraid of the thunder. I saw the first time I got into a fight at school, just because a boy teased me, called me James Baby Walker. I saw my wife Ellie's eyes on our wedding day, and those same eyes were the ones I wounded 7 years later, when I walked away convinced I'd been betrayed. With each memory, I didn't just see it. I felt it, and not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of others, too. I felt the pain Ellie held back when I walked away in silence. I felt the light in my father's eyes. When I graduated from college, a light I had missed back then, too busy thinking, he never praises me anyway. I used to think I had lived a normal life, and that I hadn't hurt anyone. But I came to understand, that's not hurting someone. It isn't the same as living with love. There was a moment when I wanted to turn away, when the truth about myself felt too heavy to bear. But then a voice spoke, not from outside me but from within. James, don't run. This is how the soul learns. This is how you grow. I collapsed. If that's even possible when you no longer have a body. And I wept. If a soul is capable of tears. I didn't know I had hurt so many people. I didn't realize how much love I had withheld. And then I saw her, a little girl, standing in the light, blue eyes, soft curly hair. And I knew in a way that defies all logic, this was my daughter. A daughter I had never met. And then the voice spoke. My name is Sophie. I chose you to be my father before I was ever born. And I've always been with you. I forgive you, if you can forgive yourself. I cried out, Sophie. I'm sorry. I don't deserve to go back. She smiled, reached out her hand, and said, you still have work to do. I'll be waiting. But first learn how to love. And then I was sent back. No thunder. No bells. Just a single breath, sudden and sharp, rushing into my lungs. My body felt like it was being pulled. Back down to earth. He's back. Check his pulse. My eyes opened. A white room. And my wife, Ellie, had her face streaked with tears. I wanted to scream to her. I saw everything. I was wrong. I love you. I'm sorry. But all that came from my throat. It was a single word. Sophie. Ellie froze. What did you just say? I didn't know where to begin. All I knew was this. I had died. And I had returned not to live, but to love. I used to think that everything would go back to normal after I came back. But it didn't. Because my life could never be the same again. 3 weeks after I returned from death, I sat in my living room, a room that used to be home. But now, when I looked at it, it was just a quiet wooden frame. I used to belong here. But after what I had experienced, I wasn't so sure anymore. Everything had changed. Not the world itself, but the way I saw the world. I looked at Ellie, the woman I had once walked away from. She had stayed. She had forgiven. She hadn't left me, even though she had every reason to. I watched her hands tremble as she made tea for me that morning. And suddenly, I saw it as a form of holiness. Before, I never noticed. I just thought, she does this because it's her duty. But now I know it was love. And I had been blind to it. I couldn't go back to work right away. My heart was weak. And honestly, my spirit was even weaker. So I began to write, line by line, memory by memory, every feeling I had carried back from the other side. I wrote about the light, the sounds, the lessons. But there was one thing. I couldn't find the words for the longing. I missed that light. I missed the feeling of seeing life through the lens of pure truth. I missed the voice soundless, yet echoing through my soul. And more than anything, I missed Sophie. How do you love the right way when all your life you've only known how to live the wrong way? That's what I asked the therapist, the one Ellie had gently urged me to see. He looked at me for a long moment, then asked quietly, James, are you sure you came back to this world to live, or just to fix what was broken? That question woke something in me. I didn't come back to continue. I came back to begin again. And beginning again means letting go. I let go of the pride that had kept me distant from Ellie. I let go of shallow relationships that never fed my soul. I let go of my old job, the one where I had chased money and titles, but lost pieces of my spirit along the way. I went back to the local community college, the same place I studied more than 20 years ago, and enrolled in a class called Positive Psychology. Not to earn a degree, but to better understand the human mind, starting with my own. I also signed up to support a local group for people who've had NDEs, near-death experiences. For the first time, I heard a woman share her story. When I died, she said, I was asked, what have you learned about love? And I didn't know how to answer. That question echoed in my mind for an entire week afterward. What had I truly learned about love? Or had I only lived around it like someone standing outside a movie theater, watching the screen through the window, but never stepping inside? One afternoon, I was sitting in the park reading a book when a little girl, maybe 7 years old, ran up and plopped down beside me. She looked at me, unblinking, and asked, "Are you sad?" I smiled. "Not exactly. But I'm missing someone." "Is it your daughter?" I froze. How did you know?" She just smiled a smile that looked exactly like Sophie's in the light. Then she ran off. I never saw her again. But from that day on, I began to believe that Sophie is still near me somehow, in some way. Ellie and I sat down together after all those years. We didn't talk about mistakes. We talked about meaning. I told her everything. About the light. About the hallway of memories. About Sophie's words. And about why I came back. Ellie cried. Not out of pain, but because she could feel that I had truly changed. She took my hand and said, "If you've been given a second chance, then live as if it's your last one." And I did just that. I started writing. Not to become famous, but to share. I visited churches, communities, classrooms to tell my story. No embellishments. No mysticism. Just the simple truth. I died. And I learned how to love. There's one question that always comes up at the end of every talk. "James, are you still afraid of dying?" And I always answer, "No. What I fear more is living without knowing why am I alive." And you know what? I don't know if Sophie will ever be born as my daughter in this life. I'm not sure if that light will welcome me again when my time truly comes. But there's one thing I am sure of. I'm not going to wait until I die again to finally live the right way. I was once shown a glimpse of humanity's future, and what I saw might just bring you to tears. That night, when I was in the white light, I didn't just see memories. I saw things that hadn't happened yet. I was taken to a place not by walking, but by intention. There was no sound, yet everything echoed like a symphony of silence. There were no lights, but everything glowed as if lit from within. A voice rose within me. It didn't give a name, it didn't speak with force, but I knew. It was the voice of supreme wisdom. "James, you have seen the past. Now, you will be shown the future. Not to fear it, but to understand. Not to avoid it, but to prepare." I was shown two paths. Two possible versions of Earth. On one side was a glass-covered city where people lived, cut off from nature, no longer making eye contact, only communicating through screens. Children were born in laboratories. No one touched. No one spoke with a real voice. Humans looked like thinking shadows. I felt it clearly. The more advanced the world became, the more disconnected it felt. I saw an old man sitting at a table in a high-rise apartment. He had everything, money, technology, even drugs to extend his life. But when he looked out the window, his eyes were empty. He no longer knew why he was alive. In the next scene, I saw crisis after crisis. The climate had turned extreme. The Earth's anger was no longer like storms or tempests. It was a cold, desperate kind of fury, wildfires raging. Sea levels are rising. Entire coastal cities swallowed. I saw the wealthy retreating to the high ground, living in smart shelters, while the rest were left behind. Once again, I felt it deep in my soul. When science evolves but the heart does not, it doesn't create progress, it creates distance. Just when I thought I would collapse under the weight of that vision, the voice spoke again. "But none of this is destiny. It is a choice." And in that moment, I was taken to the second version of the future. And I lost my breath. Earth was still Earth. But everything had changed. There were no more cold skyscrapers, just small communities living in harmony with the forest. No more social media running people's lives, but real gatherings, where people listened to one another with their hearts, not just their ears. Children played barefoot in the sun, unafraid of dirt. Elders sat under trees, reading poetry aloud to each other. Everyone carried a sense of responsibility not because of laws, but because they understood their souls were deeply connected. I saw a small room where former politicians, doctors, teachers, and farmers sat together, no hierarchy. They were rewriting the system not built on power, but on compassion. I saw a young woman caring for a sick stranger not for money, but because she believed. We weren't born to live only for ourselves. I don't know how long I spent in that world, but I didn't want to leave. I felt like a child realizing for the first time, this was what home truly meant. "James," the voice returned, "what you've seen are possibilities, but reality is the result of every soul's choice. You cannot change the world through force, but you can change the frequency of your being, and that will affect everything. Go back. Tell the story. Live as an invitation. Not through theory, but through the way you live. I came back. I woke up in the hospital. But I didn't cry from pain. I cried because I knew I had been given a chance to live again. And I had to make it matter. I began writing everything down. And then I realized I didn't need to share my story just so others could hear it. I needed to share it so others could remember. Because I believe this. All of us already know these truths. But in the noise of life, we forget. And maybe, just maybe, near-death experiences are simply one way to help us remember. So if you're watching this video, ask yourself, if the future is waiting on my choice, which one will I choose? And if one day I have to look back on my life, will I feel regret or will I smile? In the end, I only have one thing left to say. You don't have to die to wake up. But sometimes, someone who has died and come back can help you see the way. In that infinite realm of light, where time no longer flowed in a straight line but rested like a still ocean, I asked my final question. I said, if this is home, if this is pure love, then why must I return to a world so full of pain, loss, and war? I wasn't looking for a logical answer, and the reply I received wasn't given in words. It came as an experience. I was taken to a place, the most peaceful space I had ever seen. In front of me was a newborn child. It was crying, and there was no one beside it. I started to run toward it, but then a gentle voice spoke within me. James, you cannot touch the child, but you can feel what it's feeling. I closed my eyes, and what happened next changed who I was forever. I became that child. I felt the fear of not seeing my mother's arms. I felt the fragile weight of existence. The first time being separated from the warm darkness, the first time knowing what cold, what hunger, what noise truly meant. But in that moment, I felt a hand rest gently on my back. Warm. So very warm. I couldn't see the person's face, but I felt something deeper than words. You are not alone. I was pulled out of that experience back into the realm of light. And then the voice asked, James, what did you see? I answered, I saw a child who needed to be loved. And who is the one who can give that love? I was silent. The voice continued, that is why you're going back. Not to change the world in a single night. Not to preach. But to become the touch of love the world has forgotten. I choked up. Not because of the answer, but because something inside me broke open and wept. And I began to understand, we don't return to this life out of duty, punishment, or even challenge. We come back for love. Then I was shown more scenes not from my life, but from the lives of those I had touched. A hug was given to an old friend who was falling apart. A careless word that left someone wounded. A smile offered at just the right moment to a stranger who had been about to end their life. I was stunned. I had thought those things were small, but in the realm of the soul, they burned brighter than the sun. And then the voice said, James, you've believed all your life that you needed to do something great. But in this realm, every act that comes from love is great. We are not measured by status, achievements, or street addresses. We are measured by the moments we help someone remember that they are worthy of love. I felt myself dissolve into the light. There was no more me, only a current of energy flooded with emotions that had no name, gratitude, regret, hope, love, awakening. And then I saw her, my wife, the woman I had grown distant from for so many years, chasing a career while leaving her waiting in the quiet. I saw her eyes, the loneliness in them every time I turned away. I saw my son quietly folding his birthday card, already knew I wouldn't be there. I saw that everything I had once sacrificed in the name of success was now asking for me back through their tears. And then the final voice whispered, James, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. Honest with your heart and with the ones you love. Since that day, I began to live as if every day were a gift. I cooked dinner with my wife. I learned how to sit in silence and listen to my son talk about things I didn't understand, just so he would know that his dad was still here. I hugged my mother, even though I had never done that before. And I called an old friend I had once cut out of my life just to say, I'm sorry. I began sharing this story. Not to be admired, but so you know, if you're watching this video, would know that you're not alone. You don't need a life-shattering moment to wake up. You just need to listen again to that small, quiet voice inside you, the one that calls you to kindness, to love, to living just a little more authentically each day. Because if I could come back from death, then you can come back from the sleep of life. I used to think forgiveness was a gift I gave to others, but then I realized forgiveness was the gift I gave to myself. There's a memory small, but it's haunted me for decades. I was 18. It was a cold winter afternoon in North Carolina. My father was drunk, and he'd just lost everything in a football bet. I walked into the room. Before I could say a word, he threw a glass straight at my face. No reason. Just because I existed. I once made a promise to myself. I will never forgive him. Never. I believed that my anger was what made me strong. It kept me alive. It gave me something to prove that I wasn't the worthless thing he once called me. But the truth? Anger didn't help me live. It locked me in a prison I had built with my own hands. After that near-death experience, I began to see my father more clearly. Not as an abuser, but as a wounded man. A man who was once a hurting child himself, never taught how to love. A man who didn't know how to hold his son, because no one had ever held him. I looked back on it all, and for the first time, I saw his tears. Not physically, but in my mind's eye. And somehow I knew they were real. I wrote him a letter. Not to send. He had passed away many years ago. I wrote it to let go. I forgive you, Dad. Not because you were innocent, but because I deserve peace. I no longer want to live like that wild, angry boy chasing love in all the wrong places, in relationships, in career, in alcohol, just to outrun the words I never got to hear. Son, I'm sorry. Are you holding someone in your heart that you just can't forgive? Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's someone from your past. Maybe it's yourself. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the memory. Forgiveness means accepting that the memory no longer has the power to control you. I once met a woman at a gathering where I was sharing my NDE story. She said, I hated my mother for 40 years. But after hearing your story, I realized I don't have another 40 years to waste. I've let a woman who's already dead control my whole life. Today, I'm choosing to live again. She cried, and I cried too, because I saw myself in her. We can't change the past, but we can decide whether that past has the right to define our future. I also began to forgive myself for the birthdays I missed, for the nights I passed out beside a glass of whiskey instead of talking to my wife, for the people I hurt because I too was someone who had never learned how to love the right way. And strangely enough, as I began to forgive, I felt lighter. Not the kind of light they talk about in psychology, but something real. Like taking off a backpack full of bricks you didn't even realize you were carrying. You breathe easier. You smile more naturally. And most of all, you begin to see people through new eyes. No longer the betrayer. No longer the one who didn't know how to love. But souls are simply learning how to be better. Just like you. Just like me. I no longer live to get back at fate. I live to give back the love I was touched by in that realm of light. And I believe deeply that every one of us can begin again. No matter your age. No matter what you've done. Even if the other person never says they're sorry, and maybe they never will. Forgiveness is a gift. Only you can give to yourself. You can start with a letter, or a small gesture, or maybe just finally releasing that sigh you've been holding in your heart for years. When I forgave my father, I didn't just free him from my memory, I freed myself from a life of being the victim. And that it was the greatest miracle my near-death experience left me. Not a glimpse of the future. Not proof of heaven. But the chance to return to this life more human, more whole, more kind, more capable of love. I once believed the soul was just a vague idea, until I met my daughter before she was ever born. After everything I had seen, the light, the gate, the embrace of souls long gone, I thought I had reached the very edge of the afterlife. But I hadn't. That journey still had one final gift left to give. I remember it so clearly, as my soul drifted through a realm of light soft as morning mist. A presence moved toward me. It wasn't a loved one. It wasn't an angel. No wings. No clear form. Just a presence, warm, joyful, playful, like the first sunlight of early summer. And then a voice spoke not in words, but as a vibration deep within my being. You are my daughter. I froze. But I've never had a daughter. The voice laughed, a light, sparkling sound, like a stream dancing over smooth stones. You haven't yet, but I'm on my way. Then I saw an image. A little girl with soft curly hair, running through a lavender field. She turned to look at me, eyes sparkling, skin glowing as if painted by sunlight. I'm the one who brought you back. I wanted to ask, why did you choose me? But before I could speak, she disappeared, leaving behind in my heart a feeling I had never known before, complete peace and hope. 3 months later, my wife, the woman I thought might leave me after all the dark years, stood in front of me. Her eyes were red with tears. I'm pregnant. I was speechless. Overcome. And on June 6th of the following year, exactly 1 year after my near-death experience, she was born. The doctor asked me what we wanted to name her. I simply smiled and said, Sophie. Her name is Sophie. Since then, I haven't seen the world through the same eyes. I no longer view each day as a string of tiresome tasks. Now, every ray of sunlight that lands on my daughter's face feels like a gentle reminder. Live kindly. Someone is watching her father. Sophie grew up so fast, almost too fast. Even as a baby, she loved lying on my chest, her tiny hand resting right over the place where my heart had once stopped beating. And strangely, every time I held her, I felt safe as if they were the ones protecting me. One time, when she was just 4 years old, I told her the story about the day I met the angel. She sat quietly for a moment, then softly whispered, I remember, but up there, we're not supposed to tell stories too soon, Daddy. They're very strict about that. I froze, speechless. Whether you believe this or not, I'm not asking you to believe right away. I'm just asking you to listen. If you've ever seen the same numbers showing up again and again, if you've ever felt, this place doesn't feel like home, if you've ever cried and didn't know why, maybe, just maybe, some part of your soul is starting to remember something. I'm not here to tell you that you have to believe in NDEs, or in reincarnation, or angels, or messages from the universe. I just want to say, you are not alone, and you were chosen to be here, right now. It's not a coincidence that you're watching this video. We never truly die. We only change form, from light to human, from human back into light. And today, when you look into someone's eyes, a child, an old lover, a homeless stranger, or even yourself in the mirror, remember this, you've been with them before, and you'll see them again one day. At the end of that near-death journey, I carried only one thing with me, love. Not money, not status, not, I was right, they were wrong. Just a love. And if you're still here, then your purpose isn't over yet. So live, love, and if you can forgive, because someone is waiting for you on the other side, and when you return, they'll ask you, what did you learn from this precious life? I hope that one day you'll smile, reach for their hand, and say, I learned how to love others and myself. If you've ever had a strange spiritual experience, or felt like someone you love was sending you a sign from the other side, please share your story in the comments. We read to everyone. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video because you never know who might need to hear it today.